Friends, thank you for being here today. We live in a time of incredible noise. When you turn on the television or open a newspaper, you're bombarded with headlines about stock market highs, employment numbers, and political squabbles in Washington. But while our attention has been directed toward these loud, visible spectacles, the ground beneath our feet has shifted in a way that most Americans have not yet begun to comprehend. What if I told you that the United States just lost a war it didn't even know it was fighting? And what if I told you that the safety of your life savings no longer depends on the decisions made by the Federal Reserve, but on a piece of software code written halfway across the world? These are not comfortable questions. They are not the kind of questions you will hear asked on the nightly news, but they are the essential questions of our time. We are gathered here to discuss a reality that has been deliberately obscured from the American public. We are here to talk about the end of an era, specifically the end of the American era of financials, dominance, and the rise of a new system that has already won the battle for the future of global money. This is the story of the BRICS Bridge, the hidden truth behind the financial war, and why, officially, that war is already over. Let's begin by looking at the critical event that the media completely missed. To understand where we are, we must look at where we have been. For nearly a century, the United States has enjoyed a privilege unique in human history: monetary imperialism. Since the end of World War II, the US dollar has been the oxygen of the global economy. Every time a barrel of oil is sold in Saudi Arabia, every time a shipment of electronics leaves China, and every time a ton of coffee is exported from Brazil, those transactions have flowed through New York banks. It was a monopoly. Washington collected a toll, a tax, essentially, on every trade, every investment, and every breath of the global economy. It gave the United States the power to print money without consequence and to borrow without limit. It was a system designed to extract wealth from the world and concentrate it in the West. But recently, something unprecedented happened in the shadows of international finance. Something that I can only describe as the financial equivalent of splitting the atom. While the American media was distracted by domestic politics, Brazil quietly activated the BRICS Bridge system. For the first time in 80 years, major economies completed cross-border transactions without touching a single U.S. bank. They moved value from one nation to another without the U.S. dollar, without the SWIFT messaging system, and without asking for permission from Washington. This was not a pilot program. This was not a theoretical experiment. This was a declaration of independence. Paulo Nogueira Batista Jr., a man who spent decades inside the IMF and knows exactly how empires fall, put it bluntly: the United States has enjoyed monetary imperialism for nearly a century. But that monopoly just ended. President Lula of Brazil signed an executive order that sounded boring to the average listener, but it was revolutionary. It declared that Brazil could now trade directly with Russia, China, India, and South Africa, using their own central bank digital currencies. When Brazil sells soybeans to China now, they do not convert their currency into dollars first. They settle the trade instantly, using blockchain technology backed by their central banks. The transaction is faster, it is cheaper, and most terrifyingly for American regulators, it is completely invisible to them. This is the reality we must face. The United States' greatest weapon for the last 50 years was not its nuclear arsenal or its aircraft carriers. It was SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Every international bank transfer flowed through this Belgian company, which was effectively controlled by the U.S. Treasury. It was the choke point of the world. But the BRICS Bridge is not just an alternative to SWIFT. It is a bypass. It is a new highway, built right next to the old toll road, and the traffic is already diverting. In November 2024, Russia and China settled $20 billion in bilateral trade using this system. By December, India and Brazil moved $15 billion in energy transactions. By January 2025, South Africa joined the network. These numbers might seem small compared to the multi-trillion-dollar global economy. But remember, friends, every revolution starts with small numbers. The internet started with a few computers in a university basement. Bitcoin started with a single purchase of a pizza. The BRICS payment system has started with 5 countries, but the mathematics of its expansion are inevitable. Now, if you want concrete evidence, look no further than the 8-day shift that occurred just recently. If you believe this is a distant threat, something that will happen 10 or 20 years from now, I need you to look closely at a single week in December 2025. It was a period of just 8 days, December 9th through December 17th, that Washington hoped you wouldn't notice. In those 8 days, 4 specific events occurred that revealed the entire blueprint for ending dollar dominance. This was not diplomacy, this was a deployment. Day 1, December 9th, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The week began with Ethiopia launching its national digital payment strategy. The Western financial press buried this story on page 47, treating it as minor news about a developing nation. They were wrong. This was what de-dollarization infrastructure actually looks like. Ethiopia unveiled an instant payment system operated by EthSwitch. On the surface, it looks like a way for citizens to transfer money. But the strategy document explicitly stated the real goal: to integrate with BRICS payment systems and negotiate currency swap agreements. Let me translate that for you. Currency swaps mean Ethiopia can trade with India in rupees and birr. They can trade with Russia in rubles. No dollar conversion, no New York clearing banks taking a cut. Ethiopia built the digital rails to bypass the dollar entirely, creating a system with 140 million users ready to exit the American financial orbit. Day 2, December 10th, Moscow. Just one day later, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto met with Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin. The official readout, the summary given to the press, talked about energy cooperation and defense ties. But we must learn to read between the lines. Russia has been locked out of the dollar system since 2022. Indonesia is a major economy with 280 million people. When they discuss increasing trade by 17%, as they did, they are not discussing using dollars. They are discussing how to use the bypass mechanisms that Russia has built out of necessity. They were stress testing the network. Day 3, December 12th, Brasilia. 2 days later, the chairmanship of BRICS was handed over to India. This was not just a ceremonial passing of a gavel. It was a transfer of a mandate. Brazil had spent its year focusing on the politics of the system. India took over with a specific technological mission: to operationalize the alternative payment infrastructure across all member states. India brought a digital weapons arsenal to the table. India possesses the Unified Payments Interface, UPI, the world's most successful non-dollar payment infrastructure. It processes billions of transactions without Western intermediaries. India proved you don't need SWIFT to run a modern economy, and their mandate for 2026 is to export that model to the rest of the world. Day 4, December 16th, Addis Ababa. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Indian Prime Minister Modi flew to Ethiopia. It was the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 15 years. The outcome? India committed to sharing its digital public infrastructure with Ethiopia. Connect the dots, friends. Ethiopia built the rails on December 9th. 7 days later, India arrived to install the engine. They hardwired the African payment system into the Asian payment system. Now, an African nation can settle trade with an Asian nation in their own currencies, completely bypassing the Western world. This 8-day period wasn't just a series of meetings. It was the construction of a new financial architecture. The dollar defenders will tell you that BRICS cannot challenge the reserve currency status because there is no alternative. But in 8 days, they built one. This brings us to the mechanism of why this new system is winning so decisively. Why is this happening now? And why is it happening so fast? To understand the speed of this collapse, you have to understand the difference between the old technology and the new. The United States will try to stop this system. They will threaten sanctions. They will claim it threatens stability. But there is one thing they cannot do. They cannot offer a better product. The dollar system, specifically the SWIFT network, was never designed to be fair, and it was certainly never designed to be efficient. It is a relic of the 1970s. A traditional international transfer takes 3 to 5 business days to settle. It involves correspondent banks in New York, London, or Frankfurt. At every step of the way, someone takes a fee. The total cost of sending money can range from 3% to 7%. Now, compare that to the BRICS Bridge. The BRICS system uses blockchain technology, a shared digital ledger, to settle transactions in real time, not 3 days, instantly. And the cost? Less than 0.1%. When Brazil buys oil from Russia using this bridge, the payment arrives in Moscow before the tanker even leaves the port. There are no middlemen. There are no fees for currency conversion. There's no waiting for a bank in New York to open for business. This brings us to a hard truth about capitalism. Money has no patriotism. It has a fiduciary duty. We are seeing reports that major American corporations, companies like ExxonMobil and Apple, are secretly conducting feasibility studies on these payment systems for their overseas operations. They cannot say this publicly because of the political pressure from Washington, but in the boardroom, the math is undeniable. If ExxonMobil can pay for Venezuelan oil using Brazilian reals instead of sanctioned dollars, avoiding the friction and fees of the U.S. system, they will do it. If Apple can buy semiconductors using yuan without paying the dollar tax, they will do it. The genius of the BRICS Bridge is that it creates a network effect. The more countries that join, the more valuable the network becomes. And the more valuable it becomes, the more countries want to join. We saw this with the internet. We saw it with credit cards. Once a technology is faster, cheaper, and better, adoption becomes exponential. The BRICS Bridge has reached that critical mass. If you are finding this analysis valuable so far and want to stay ahead of these economic shifts, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us break through the algorithm to reach more people who deserve to know the truth about their financial future. But what was the catalyst for all of this, It comes down to the fatal mistake of 2022. You might be asking yourself, if the dollar system was so expensive and inefficient, why did the world use it for 80 years? The answer is trust. For decades, countries kept their reserves in dollars because Washington promised those reserves were safe. They promised that the dollar was apolitical, that global trade was separate from American foreign policy. We told the world, trust us. We are the neutral arbiter of value. Then, in 2022, the United States made a catastrophic mistake. In response to the invasion of Ukraine, the US government froze the central bank reserves of Russia. Regardless of your opinion on the war, from a financial perspective, this was the moment the music stopped. By freezing those funds, Washington broke the most important rule of international finance. They weaponized what was supposed to be neutral money. They sent a message to the world, if we don't like your government, your money disappears. Saudi Arabia saw this. The United Arab Emirates saw this. Even our allies in Germany and France saw this. They realized that keeping their national wealth in U.S. treasuries was like giving a gun to someone who might shoot them later. It became a matter of national security to find an exit. Countries are not moving to the BRICS system because they hate America. They are not moving because they love Chinese communism or Russian authoritarianism. They are moving out of fear. They are moving to protect their sovereignty. The BRICS Bridge exploits this fear brilliantly. It offers something the dollar no longer can: mathematical neutrality. The new system is encoded in algorithms. It is a distributed ledger controlled by all the member central banks, not by a single Treasury Department in Washington. No single country can freeze the funds. No single politician can reverse a payment. This is the psychological shift that the media ignores. For 80 years, the world believed they needed America's permission to trade. The BRICS Bridge has proven that this permission was an illusion. Brazil doesn't need Washington's approval to trade with Russia. India doesn't need New York to buy energy from Iran. They just needed the plumbing to go around us. Now they have it. This leads us to the inevitable consequence, a global run on confidence. What does this mean for you? What does it mean for the retiree in Florida, the shop owner in Ohio, the teacher in Canada? Washington is panicking because they can see the mathematics, and the mathematics are grim. Currently, the United States enjoys an economic benefit called seigniorage. It is a fancy economic term for a very simple privilege. We print the money that the world uses. When a foreign nation holds dollars, they are essentially giving the U.S. government an interest-free loan. This demand for dollars allows the U.S. government to run massive deficits, fund a global military, and consume far more than we produce. It is a hidden tax that the rest of the world pays to America. It generates roughly $100 billion per year in pure profit for the government and trillions in cheap credit for the American people. But as the BRICS Bridge expands, that demand for dollars evaporates. When global trade flows through the dollar system, central banks around the world must hold dollars in reserve to facilitate the trade. If trade moves to a neutral ledger, they no longer need those piles of dollars. They will start to sell them. This creates a run on confidence. It is the same dynamic as a run on a bank, but on a planetary scale. If the dollar's share of global reserves drops below 50%, it loses its status as the undisputed reserve currency. If it drops below 30%, the American economy enters a death spiral. When foreign nations stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, interest rates in the United States will skyrocket. The cost of your mortgage will go up. The cost of servicing the national debt will consume the entire federal budget. The value of the dollar will collapse, causing the price of imported goods, everything from electronics to clothes to car parts, to explode. We are witnessing the end of the exorbitant privilege. The inflation we have seen in recent years is just the tremor before the earthquake. As the world rejects the dollar, those dollars will flood back home to the United States, chasing fewer and fewer goods. However, we must also understand the geopolitical aftershock, the choice between ideology and survival. But friends, we must understand that this transition will not be a polite handover of keys. History teaches us that empires do not surrender their privileges voluntarily. They fight to protect them. And this is exactly what we are seeing today. The chaos you see on the news, the proxy wars, the sudden sanctions, the political instability in Latin America and the South China Sea, these are not random events. They are symptoms of a system that is fighting for its life. The United States and its closest architects of the old order are applying maximum pressure to stop the bleeding. They are telling their allies in Europe, in Japan, and in Canada, you are either with us or you are against us. This creates a terrifying dilemma for the middle powers of the West. Consider a nation like Canada or the countries of the European Union. For decades, they have existed comfortably under the American security umbrella. Their economies deeply intertwined with the US dollar. But now they face an impossible choice. If they cling to the dollar system as it collapses, they risk becoming collateral damage. They risk importing American inflation, suffering from American sanctions on their trading partners, and watching their own currencies evaporate alongside the greenback. But if they pivot, if they dare to trade with the BRICS bloc and neutral currencies, They risk the wrath of Washington. We are moving from a world that was a fortress, a single protected garden where the rules were clear and the dollar was king, to a world that is a maze. In this maze, survival isn't about loyalty, it's about agility. The smart nations are already quietly building backdoors. Even French firms are experimenting with non-dollar trades just in case. They know what is coming. And what is coming is the BRICS unit. While the media distracts you with stock prices, the BRICS nations are finalizing a new trade settlement currency backed not by promises, but by a basket of commodities: gold, oil, and rare earth minerals. China is stockpiling gold at a rate that is frankly staggering. Russia is signaling that it will sell oil for gold. This changes the fundamental physics of the global economy. In the old system, he who had the most dollars made the rules. In the new system, he who has the resources makes the rules. Imagine a world where a Western nation needs to import oil or rare earth minerals for its tech industry. In the past, they simply printed money to buy it. In the future, the seller in the global south may say, "We don't want your paper. We want something real." This returns us to a form of hard asset trade that the West has not had to practice for a century. This is the hidden cost of the transition. The subsidized lifestyle of the Western middle class, cheap electronics, cheap fuel, cheap clothes, was paid for by the world's willingness to accept our paper money. When that willingness ends, the subsidy ends, prices adjust to reality, and reality is much more expensive than what we are used to. The geopolitical shockwave is forcing every nation to reveal what they value most: their ideological loyalty to the old American order, or their economic survival in the new multipolar reality. For some, the hesitation will be fatal. For others, who recognize the shift early, it will be the opportunity of a century. I realize this paints a stark picture. Does this shift in global power make you feel anxious about the future, or do you see it as a necessary correction? I want to know where you stand. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. We are witnessing the great revaluation, when resources replace reputation. To fully grasp the magnitude of what comes next, we must look at the specific mechanism of the West's decline: the bond market. For the better part of a century, U.S. Treasury bonds were considered the risk-free asset of the world. They were the foundation of every pension fund, every insurance company, and every central bank balance sheet. But what happens when the biggest buyers of that debt, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, stop buying? We are seeing U.S. Treasury bonds turn radioactive. As demand plummets, yields spike, and the prices nosedive. This forces global banks to reevaluate their entire existence. But the crisis is not just about numbers on a screen. It is about the revaluation of what actually constitutes wealth. In the old world, wealth was defined by credit ratings, brand reputation, and GDP, a metric often inflated by financial services and speculative bubbles. In the new world that is emerging, wealth is defined by physics. Can you heat your homes? Can you feed your people? Can you build your infrastructure? This is where the resource fortresses will rise. Consider our neighbor to the north, Canada. For years, Canada has been seen as a quiet, compliant partner to the U.S. economy. But look at the assets. Canada is the fifth largest oil exporter in the world. It is a top 10 producer of gold, uranium, wheat, and potash. It holds vast rivers of fresh water. In a post-dollar world, these are not just commodities, they are the new currency. If the dollar collapses, a country like Canada, or Australia, or Brazil faces a stark choice. They can go down with the ship, clinging to a currency that is losing value daily. Or they can pivot. They can price their oil in yuan, their wheat in gold, or their uranium in a new BRICS currency unit. If they choose the latter, they become the Switzerlands of the 21st century. We could see the loonie transform from a petrocurrency into a global reserve asset, backed by tangible wealth rather than American debt. Foreign direct investment would flood into these resource havens, fleeing the chaotic bond markets of the US and Europe. But this opportunity comes with a dark shadow for the United States. We are entering a period where the service economy is exposed as a fragile construct. You cannot print oil, you cannot print microchips, you cannot print food. When the global supply chain demands payment in hard assets, the United States, which has run a trade deficit for decades, will find itself in the position of a debtor who has run out of credit. This is the nightmare scenario for the Federal Reserve. If foreigners won't buy our debt, the Fed must buy it. They will print trillions of dollars to monetize the debt, leading to a doom loop of inflation that makes the 1970s look like a picnic. The Great Revaluation means that nations with debt will sink and nations with resources will float. The middle powers of the world are watching this dynamic intently. They are calculating the exact moment to switch sides. And when they do, the rush for the exits will not be a slow trickle. It will be a stampede. In the midst of this paper storm, we must look for sanctuary in real assets. This transition will be messy. The United States will not surrender its monetary privilege peacefully. We are already seeing the chaos: sanctions, tariffs, financial sabotage. But the outcome is inevitable. The paper world, the world of fiat currency, unbacked promises, and government debt, is giving way to the real world. In this new era, the winners will not be the countries with the best printing presses. The winners will be the countries with the real assets. This is why central banks are buying gold at a pace we haven't seen in decades. China is stockpiling it. Russia is hoarding it. They are preparing for a system backed by tangible value. Interestingly, this shift puts nations like Canada in a unique position. As the dollar stumbles, the world is looking for safe harbors. But they aren't looking for safe paper anymore. They are looking for safe resources: oil, minerals, food, water, potash, uranium. We are seeing a shift where countries that produce real things, commodities, energy, food, are forming the new backbone of the global economy. The BRICS nations know this. They are essentially a club of commodity producers. They are saying, we have the oil, the wheat, and the gold. Why are we trading it for American paper? For the individual investor, particularly those of us who have spent a lifetime saving, this is a signal. The old rules of a 60-40 portfolio, heavy on government bonds, assumed a stable dollar. That assumption is now the biggest risk in your portfolio. The smart money is doing what the central banks are doing, moving toward assets that cannot be printed. This brings us to the final realization. The road back is officially closed. Friends, I want to be very clear about where we stand. I have spent my career studying how financial systems rise and fall. The pattern is always the same. First, the old system becomes exploitative. Then, alternatives emerge. Finally, the alternatives become dominant. We are currently past the point of emergence. We are in the transition. The BRICS Bridge has won, not because it is perfect, but because it exists. Once the proof of concept was demonstrated, once Brazil showed the world it could bypass New York instantly and cheaply, the genie was out of the bottle. You cannot uninvent a faster, cheaper payment system. You cannot force the world to go back to paying 7% fees and waiting 5 days when they can pay 0.1% and settle instantly. The financial war is over. The bridge is built. The traffic is flowing. There is no road back. The American empire will not collapse overnight. It will not disappear tomorrow morning. But it has lost its most important weapon: the ability to control global money. The world is becoming multipolar. Countries are trading based on mutual benefit, not American approval. This transformation is happening faster than anyone in Washington realizes or is willing to admit. They are trying to suppress the technical details. They are hoping you won't notice the 8-day shift that occurred in December. They are hoping you will keep your faith in a system that is mathematically obsolete. But now you know. You know why the media is silent. You know why the geopolitical tension is rising. It is the sound of a monopoly breaking. The only question that remains is not whether the old system will collapse, but how you will position yourself and your family for what comes next. The world has changed. The dollar has lost. And for the first time in our lives, we must look at the future with eyes wide open to a reality where America is just one player at the table, rather than the owner of the casino. Thank you.